Good morning and welcome to June 20th edition of Japanese Politics 101 with Timothy Langley, Chief Executive Officer of Langley Esquire, and me, Maya Matsuoka, the host of this show. We are delighted to have you here again, as there have been many developments around the vaccine rollout, the Olympics, geopolitics, the upcoming Tokyo elections, and Mr. Suga's premiership. Today's session will be maximum 20 minutes long. After Timothy runs through the 5 topics, we'll have a Q&A session, so please let us know if you have a comment or a question so that we can bring you up on stage. Timothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Our show just keeps growing, and I really appreciate that. Please continue to tune in and tell your friends about it, but that's just the marketing part of it. The real beef is that it needs to be topical and interesting and something that's really of value and keen interest to everybody who lives in Japan or who is following U.S.-Japan relations or Japan's stance in the rest of the world. So we're going to hit those topics so that we can bring everybody up to speed, even if you're only kind of reading the newspapers and trying to figure out what it means and what's going on. And I hope that this is a source for you. So there's a lot going on. You remember from last week I predicted that it was going to be a busy week. It certainly was. The diet closed down on Thursday, 150 days since the beginning in January. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle going on with the opposition parties. They, in typical fashion, floated a no confidence motion that was defeated. And now what's on the horizon, on the immediate horizon, and that means within the next 4 or 5 weeks, is the Tokyo Metropolitan Olympics, which kick off this next week, with the election to be on July 4th. So they'll have a 10-day election campaign window, and then on Sunday they will have the voting. And then it moves very quickly into the Olympics. But before that, and a lot of the tea leaves that you need to be reading are evident to us now, and they're happening if you just know what to watch out for. So the first thing that's coming up is the Gubernatorial election in Shizuoka. That's today, and it's a bellwether. It's a governor's position, so it's pretty important. It is Shizuoka, and it will reveal how the opposition and the LDP Komeito relationship is working on what their strategies are on campaigning, and it's like a test field. And how it comes out, if they've won, if they've lost, then they'll reevaluate. But then they're going to come into Tokyo with the same sort of tactics. That will be another test field for what comes up with the national elections when Mr. Suga closes down the House in September. So with that as just kind of a backdrop, let me hit my 5 topics. Today I'm going to talk about vaccines. I'm going to talk about the Olympics. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on geopolitical. It's been very active with the G7 last week. Tokyo elections, I'm going to go just a bit deeper into that. And then the standing of Mr. Suga. Every month they publish a popularity survey, and that was just released yesterday. And once again, as we pretty much felt, his popularity has fallen. He's now probably around 36%, but his disapproval rating has really shot up. It's almost 50%, 47% in the report. I don't know how representative it is. It's usually pretty good. But there's just so much going on, so much anticipation, so much uncertainty. So first of all, let me hit vaccines. So the state of emergency, as you know, ends today. Most of us know that. It was established almost 25 days ago because the numbers were starting to inch up and the Olympics are coming down the path. So the Suga administration decided to claim a state of emergency in 10 prefectures. And he announced yesterday the release of 9 of those 10. Okinawa is not being released from the state of emergency. Okinawa's numbers, although they're declining, they're not declining as emergency consideration until July 11th, which is just before the start of the Olympics. So it's a state of emergency kind of backed off a little bit, but Tokyo and Osaka, being the most populous and also being the most worrisome, will have a little bit of a heightened state of emergency, but it's not a state of emergency, read my lips, sort of thing. So it's something to keep your eye on. Also, the variants seem to be increasing in April, and they're watching that very closely. At the same time, right now, almost 16% of the entire population of Japan has been vaccinated. That is astounding, because a month ago, if you're watching the show or if you're on the show, only 3%. So there was a lot of criticism about the slow rollout. Not just, mostly we observe. We're not actually criticizing, because that would be undiplomatic. But 3%, a month ago, and now 15.8%. That's pretty darn good. The kind of quirky things about it, there's always something quirky about it, is that when the athletes come in, and they are starting to float in, they say that about 80% of the athletes will be vaccinated, which makes you scratch your head with as much effort as they're pouring into having a safe Olympics, which is what Mr. Suga says. There are 70,000 volunteers who are helping with the people movement and translators and things like that, the support people. It is left open to question whether they're going to be vaccinated or not. They're not in the group that the Japanese government has said, we will vaccinate you. So when the athletes come in, we will vaccinate you if you haven't already been vaccinated. But it is left up to individual choice. So for a lot of different reasons, religious or, just because you're getting ready to go into a vaccine, there are a lot of different reasons for that. But 80% is kind of their target. The other kind of interesting thing is that the Japanese Foreign Ministry has said for all the embassies that are in Japan, and almost not every country in the world, but almost every country in the world has a diplomatic mission in Tokyo. It is one of the 3 major capitals of the world, and it is also the source of lots of aid and funding. So whether you're in a healthy economy or you're looking for money from the Japanese, you would have a diplomatic mission here. So there are about 135 countries of the world. About 110 of them will have an opportunity from the foreign ministry to get vaccinated. So that letter went out. It's going out to all of the embassies. I don't know. Yes, there's probably some embassies that need to take advantage of that. I know with other embassies like the United States, they receive their vaccines in diplomatic pouches. They've already been distributed. All of the embassy staff, at least in the United States, probably in Britain, France, some of the other countries, they've already been inoculated, maybe twice. So it's a nice thing to do. The foreign ministry taking care of the diplomatic guests of the country, and also the vaccine diplomacy that Japan is practicing. The United States is doing the same thing, but I got to tell you, the gift of vaccines to Taiwan was just so well received. We reported on it last week, and it's continuing to generate a lot of goodwill, and it kind of spills over into the geopolitical realm, which is something we'll talk about later. Anyway, that's about it for vaccines. I think that's about it. The vaccine passport. So yes, the Japanese, with the digital agency being launched, of course, you would imagine that the Japanese vaccine passport is going to be high tech, and it's not. it's going to be paper and a fingerprint and hunko, and you have to go to the. I'm kidding. It will be paper, and probably start to roll out on June 1. And it's kind of too bad. It's not supposed to be sunny, but the municipalities who are administering vaccines are so under strain, as they've been complaining about the whole time, that they're not quite certain that they've documented everybody who's gotten the vaccine. So of all of the people who have gotten the vaccine, we're not quite sure. So we're not sure if this vaccine passport applies to these people. So the Japanese government, acknowledging that, says, look, the vaccine passport will be used for people who travel internationally, maybe not domestically, because it would be too much of a rush, too big of a job, and we don't have the great confidence. So just for international business, this paper passport will be issued, and then you can go overseas and do your business. The problem with that is that it only is for international travel, and it is only for acknowledgement of vaccines administered in Japan. Of course, anybody that has a vaccine passport from any other country, they don't have a system in place for that. So it's one of those things. It's probably going to take a good year before somebody comes up with an idea of making it all cohesive and homogenized. But at this point right now, I think they're just happy to get some form of a vaccine passport, because everybody else is rolling out. The French are rolling it out, guns blazing. They're just going really quickly. It will be digital. The Americans are still considering that too. So the Japanese, gosh, it's just, with this move towards digitization, you would have hoped that they would have had a better handle on it. But let me close off with that and see if there are any questions. And let's try and zoom through this briefing as quickly as possible, but I'm open to questions now, and if not, then I'll go on to the Olympics.
Well, it seems that the way you presented the topic is quite clear, at least at this point of time. Maybe later there will be questions. So diplomacy, donations.
Sweet.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead.
Let's go ahead. Thank you very much. Oh, and I'm seeing lots of friends and old faces signed on. Thank you very much, Tom. Hi, Ted. Takeshi. So let me zoom through the Olympics. So Suga announced there's another fight. There's always a fight going on. And we kind of sometimes focus on the fights because they reveal lots of things about personality and psychology and the direction of the government. So the fight right now is between Suga and the person he appointed to be, kind of the official to report together with 25 experts on what we do in the Olympics with regard to spectators. This fellow, very, qualified, as you would imagine, and Mr. Suga gave joint briefings, and he said in the briefing that, to be safe, there should be no spectators. Of course, no foreigners, but no spectators for the Olympics. That's the only way to guarantee that it will be safe. And Mr. Suga came back and said, it's funny because, you would have thought that they would have gotten their story straight, but apparently there is a break here that Mr. Suga wants to keep on top of. And he says 10,000 people can be in any of the stadiums, any of the spectators, 10,000, only Japanese, of course, or maybe resident foreigners. Only 10,000, and if the stadium doesn't hold that many, then 50% capacity. So some of the events might not have a capacity for that, but if it's less than that, then just at least 50% of the seats can be filled. The other thing that's interesting is that the officials and the staff of people who are coming to this country to participate in the games, and not the athletes themselves, but the staff and the support, were originally going to be about 180,000 people flooding into Japan, and that number now stands at 53,000. So that's almost 1/3 of what the original number was. So looking at that, you can kind of extrapolate to other parts of how the Olympics will be held. But certainly, the foreigners coming into the country will not be getting that kind of access. The numbers on business travelers is restricted, and quarantine applies to them. So there's unlikely to be much of a relaxation with regard to those business travelers as opposed to the Olympic-related travelers. So there's special arrangements for them. The fear here is that with the variants and the numbers in Osaka and Tokyo being somewhat accommodating to dropping the state of emergency and also being more aggressive about moving towards the Olympics. You've noticed that tone if you're watching carefully. Over the last 10 days, it only started about 10 days ago, maybe a week ago, where they're starting to talk up the numbers. They're starting to say, these numbers are coming down. It's looking really good. We're going to have spectators, ice cream and popsicles. So the story is changing, and there's the lifting of the mood. You can now serve alcohol. Everybody go out and have a drink. You can do that now. So this kind of I don't know if it's accurate to call it manipulation, but this massaging of the story so that we can go into the Olympics is happening now. And who is to say that the numbers are not just fudged a little bit, because we need to keep the population calm and we need to hold the Olympics. They've already decided that. It's kind of the road of no return, but that there's a cluster that occurs. There's athletes like the Ghanaian athlete who came in and tested positive. If that sort of thing begins to happen, then they'll reduce it. They'll reduce the spectators. They'll withdraw the tickets. The ticket issue is just unbelievable, because so many people purchase their tickets, not just Japanese but overseas. The refunding that needs to go there, and if they say yes, you can exercise your ticket, maybe not at the event you want, but there'll be a voucher for you attending something else. That the logistics that are involved in there is just so enormous, and there's so little time. Listen, 5 weeks away, so it's really 3.5 million Japanese ticket holders. So there's going to be some disappointment and some usurpation of money. You sold me a ticket, I didn't get access. You didn't return the money to me, that sort of thing. So the Olympics, in a nutshell, is going forward. We've got less than 5 weeks in front of us. We've got the start of Tokyo Olympics before that. A lot more is going to happen. Keep your eye on the ball, and let's see how that rolls out. That's the 2-bit news on the Olympics for now. I'm going to move into
Thank you. Can you hear me, Timothy? Because I think that the connection is breaking a little bit.
Ooh. Okay. How is this?
Much better now. Thank you. Well, I think that
great.
We can continue with the next topic. I guess it's geopolitics, right? Or
yes, geopolitics.
Yes, let's go ahead with it. Yeah.
Okay. So just to kind of reset the room for those of you who are our first-time listeners, this is on Japanese politics. We talk about all things about Japanese politics that are meaningful and important to you as a Japan watcher or as somebody who lives here or does business in Japan. So now I'm going to talk about the geopolitical situation. And by the way, this is kind of a briefing. It's an open dialogue as well to engender your comments and your feedback too. So although I swim through it really quickly and I pretend to act like I know what I'm talking about, it really is a dialogue for all of us to participate. So with that, let me get into the political. There are a lot of people here that know a whole lot more about this than me, but let me get into it. So as everybody knows, the G7 was last week because Suga showed up, of course. Joe Biden went famously. There was a lot of news, a lot of press about how he was going to do there at G7, and then 3 days later, his meeting with Vladimir Putin, which is really a 1-2 punch. It reveals a lot about the Biden administration, what their policies are likely to be, what the stance of the United States is with regard to Russia and with regard to China. It looks like, there are a lot of issues between the United States and Russia, but they pale in comparison with regard to China. And everybody seems to be up in arms about China. The G7 was mostly focused on that, and also Joe Biden, President Biden, revealed a little bit more about his policy about engagement and the military stance with regard to the Taiwan Straits and status of forces, that sort of thing. Similarly, with South Korea, so South Korea had a law that they were considering. They're having the same problem that Japan is having. Their declining population. They're not having children in the numbers that they used to be, and population is so closely tied to productivity and GDP in any country. So they were considering allowing individuals who were long-term residents but not Korean citizens to become Korean citizens. It created a huge backlash because the next door neighbor is China, so the vast majority of potential new citizens, children of joint marriages or maybe people who have emigrated, are mostly Chinese. And, sometimes Japan is criticized as being somewhat xenophobic, but boy, it goes in spades in Korea. They just were up in arms about the Chinese. So this negative impression about Chinese encroachment, not just in the South China Seas, but also with trade and diplomacy with their next door neighbor Korea, has also flared up. And there's a huge fear that the Chinese will take over our country and dominate our voting and tell everybody in the world that they invented kimchi, which is a real thing apparently, that the Koreans don't want anybody to claim that. NATO has come out with also a strong stance against China, militarily forming alliances and joining their forces. There's a lot going on with Britain, France, the Netherlands, in fact, setting naval task force to this region. The French were here last week, joint exercises. There's just an awful lot going on. Even the Chinese, my God, 28 warplanes they sent through Taiwanese space, or approaching Taiwanese security space last week alone. It's the largest number. And it just followed the G7 announcement of, we're going to go get China. We're going to gang up on China. China is not our friend. So this was some kind of tweak in the nose that the message that was sent, and it's a very powerful message, especially if you've got a task force there. Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier task force is in the region and running exercises. So it's an interesting time for Japan and also for the region. It looks like there have been some signals, although you can't really read everything into it, that China is beginning to soften their stance, maybe go a little bit more hot diplomatically rather than encroachment on, the Spratlys and the artificial islands and the encroachment on Taiwanese airspace. But anyway you look at it, it is a very hot region. It looks like it might get hotter with other military naval task forces joining the region and the exercises that would be going on there. And frequently in that kind of a mix, sometimes mistakes happen. Somebody reads the wrong signal, or it's just a very delicate time. So keep your eyes on that. We'll keep our eyes on it and continue to report to you on those issues, and also invite comments from some of the smart people that are in the room now. So with that, I'd like to close up the geopolitical snapshot and then move on to Tokyo elections afterwards. if there are any questions or comments.
Please let us know, raise your hand, and yes, if you have a comment, or just if you want to contradict Timothy, that's okay too.
It's not okay.
Oh no, oh sorry then. Okay, maybe after. Okay, so obviously there is a lot of stuff going on here in the region, and well, it's also, you know, the relations between South Korea and Japan as well, but that's probably much smaller part in the bigger picture. So however, let's continue with the next one, the Tokyo elections, because they're the next coming up, and there is a lot of things going there too.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you everybody for being so patient and you know, biding your time to jump on me until after I've finished with this portion. Then Mr. Suga, and then you can have that. So Tokyo elections are coming up. Today is the 20th. They start on the 25th, so it's geared so that you have the 10-day election window and then voting day, and voting day is on July 4th, which would be a Sunday. Almost every election is on a Sunday. So the gubernatorial election in Shizuoka is today. Today's a Sunday. That will be closely watched. Just keep your eye on it. Maybe if you're watching Japanese television or in the news tomorrow, to see how that one came out, because it will be indicative of many other things that are happening just around the corner. So this week, the Tokyo elections will begin. It's complicated because there's a fight going on at the national level between the Secretary General of the LDP and the former Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, who was in power. Mr. Nikai was also the Secretary General at that point. So the Secretary General has been in power as long as Mr. Abe was serving as Prime Minister, the longest serving Prime Minister. So that means, by definition, Mr. Nikai is the longest serving Secretary General. He's still in power. He's still in position, and he's exercising his rights as Secretary General. He's got a stranglehold on the LDP. So that is being challenged by Mr. Abe and Mr. Suga. They want to quietly, deftly oust the Secretary General so that they can put their own man in, because without that position under your control, you really can't control the LDP. You can't control the elections. There's a lot of power that's vested in that, and that's by design. So the reason why we're mentioning that is because Mr. Nikai is very close with the Tokyo governor, Koike, and she was once an LDP member, and now she is the governor of Tokyo, and she has started her own party in doing that, a very successful party, Tomin First. So this election campaign will tell us a lot about the political standing and the appeal of the various parties at the Tokyo level, Ishin no Kai, the LDP, Komeito, and Tomin First. These four largest major parties. There's a lot of complications. So Komeito, as you know, is a coalition partner with the LDP in the national government, and Komeito is and has always been very close with China, very favorable to forming a strong relationship there. It is a bit at odds with the LDP position, but it's good and it's safe since it's a coalition. So this will be kind of examined in Tokyo Tokyo Metropolitan candidates' speeches. There could be something that comes out within the next 2 weeks about China's encroachment that would diminish or maybe even just quiet the Komeito candidates from talking about their policies or their policy positions with regard to China. So it's going to be very active there, and it's going to be hotly contested. So it's something to watch. You will notice this visually as Friday rolls around. The billboards will be going up. They'll have numbers on the billboards, depending on what district of Tokyo you're in. And then the faces of the politicians will go up. They go up in a random assortment so that you can't purchase, being in the number one position or being in the center position of these billboards. But you begin to see who all of these candidates are. So take a time to look at them and see who is running, and just keep your eye on it. You will be inundated with the sound trucks and with people handing out placards at radios, at train stations and that sort of thing. One of the funny things that Mr. Nikai said was, you just wait until our opposition sees our new campaign trucks. They've got a brand new campaign truck in the LDP, and he thinks that's going to be a defining factor in Tokyo Olympic elections and in national elections. It's kind of laughable. In any event, Mr. Kishida has started his own kind of pre-candidate group. It's a league for against discrimination. Yes, it's funny, maybe ironic, but hopefully it really carries some weight. But he's establishing a league against discrimination to collect like-minded members of the parliament on an issue of importance, but it's really kind of a prelude to, I'm going to be candidate for prime minister. I need 20 signatures to endorse my candidacy. So that's Kishida is doing that. And not to be outdone, Mr. Nikai has started his own league, the Free Indo-Pacific League. He's really starting to rile people like Abe and Suga in making these moves. It impacts on what's going on in the Tokyo elections, but it's a signal, it's a precursor of what's going to happen in the national elections. Those national elections, as you know, the Tokyo Metropolitan elections, then the Olympics, and then soon after that, the Prime Minister will have a State of the Union. He'll announce a supplementary budget, and then everybody's going to be so happy with that. And then he's going to close down the House. There'll be an election, and then there'll be the election for Prime Minister. That is the general rollout right now. So all of these things, even though I talk about them separately, it's hard to talk about them in isolation without bringing in some of the other things that are going on. The only final thing that I'd like to mention in Tokyo elections is the rollout of vaccines, how that is being perceived. Mr. Suga has his role, but Ms. Koike has her role as well, as the leader of, the Metropolitan Tokyo. So the fact that the vaccines are rolling out really briskly now is a good reflection on both the Prime Minister and Ms. Koike. There's still a little bit of consternation about the slowness, but it is beginning to pick up speed. And you'll notice yourself that, chambers of commerce, universities, big organizations, Toyota, have received distribution of vaccine and are inoculating employees, family and friends, that sort of thing. So it's really starting to be brisk. The thing to watch this week is the Abe Nikai kind of fight. It's happening quietly, but it could flare up pretty quickly as we approach the Tokyo elections. Keep your eye on that. With that, I'd like to close up the Tokyo elections component. My final component will be talking about Mr. Suga on things that we haven't quite mentioned yet, and then we'll wrap it up open it for questions. So with that, let me close that up and see what...
Thank you for that. It's fascinating to see how, the younger members of LDP are actually trying to seize power by having Mr. Nikai quit. Well, he's not going to quit really, but yeah, it's interesting to see what happens there. And of course, so your the next topic you're going to talk about is Mr. Suga. And then just the other day there was news in the, well, I think in some newspapers that according to an NHK survey, so the support for Mr. Suga is 37%. So at all times low. So it's interesting to see how things develop. But I'm really curious to know what you have to tell us about this now.
Thank you, Maya. So the interesting thing about the survey that was run was not so much his unpopularity, but also the negative votes against him. That's increasing. That's approaching 50%. Do you disapprove or dislike the prime minister's handling? That is a worrying number for the prime minister as he goes towards the election of the lower house. The election of the lower house will determine his standing as prime minister. And that's kind of the bellwether, but how he does with the Olympics is also going to determine his position. So many people 80% of the Japanese population in recent polls have said, we don't want the Olympics. And that's why the tone turned so quickly, because you can kind of browbeat the Japanese population by just saying, this is what we're going to do, so get on with it, be prepared for it, and then people kind of fall in line. The opposition begins to diminish a little bit. The opposition, when they closed down the House, they just really were looking for a fight. The prime minister was going to end the 150-day diet session, and the opposition party said, no, we want another 3-month extension. I mean, you just roll your eyes when you think about that, but we want another 3-month extension so that we can talk about COVID, we can talk about the vaccines, we can talk about the Olympics. And of course, the prime minister and the LDP just want to put this behind them. And they threatened, the opposition party threatened, if you don't extend the diet so that we can beat you up some more, we're going to form a no confidence motion. And Mr. Nikai had suggested earlier, not just this last week, but probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, if the opposition party attempts to form a no confidence motion, I'm going to make sure that we close down the House and run for election immediately, it's kind of a false threat, because the LDP had already promised Ms. Koike that they wouldn't run an election, they wouldn't close down the House for 2 months before the Tokyo election and 2 months after the Tokyo election. And the reason for that was because having the threat of having yet another election when you've just had one, people are exhausted, you've run through your campaign funds, it's just too much. It would diminish it would just be unfair. The LDP would really extract too much of the lion's share of the publicity, the energy. So they made a promise about that. So Mr. Nikai's promise, I guess they could still do it, was somewhat false. But the no confidence motion in any event didn't pass. It almost never passes. This is almost always at the end of the diet session threatened by the opposition party. But once again, it didn't go this time either. So the extended diet session didn't happen, and Mr. Nikai, immediately after the no confidence motion was defeated, and the following day, which was Thursday, they closed down, they ended the diet session. And he was on the news saying, well, yes, I could have done that, but I guess, Mr. Suga thinks it's probably proper not to, so I guess I won't. So he mumbles, he's like Maya was saying, the younger politicians are just eager for some change, for something to happen within the LDP. And maybe his time has come, but he still wields an enormous amount of power. That fight is just itching to be had, so please keep your eyes on that. When you talk about elections coming up, the opposition always wants to look at, disfigurements and blemishes and all of the things that they can point at and say, that's why you want to vote for us, don't vote for those guys. And one of those blemishes was handed on a platter on Friday. A former justice minister, this is a big deal, former justice minister was sentenced to 3 years for vote buying in Hiroshima. Just to give you a little bit of a reminder on that, his name is Kawai. He's from Hiroshima. He is the lower house. His wife ran for the upper house and won in Hiroshima. And the two of them, it's a kind of a two-man team, they were caught distributing funds in anticipation of the election so that she could win. They were both arrested. She was released and given 16 months on a suspended term for 5 years. So that means she has to keep her nose clean for 5 years, or that 16 months will be applied against her. Her husband got hit really hard, though, 3 years jail time and 1.3 million yen a fine, which is kind of a laugh. That's maybe $13,000 as a fine. And what he did was he distributed almost $300,000 among maybe 100 politicians in the Hiroshima area so that his wife would win the upper house seat. She also received part of the pool of money that he was distributing, and she distributed it to a fewer number. She also wasn't a former justice minister. So somebody with that kind of throwaway, just making suggestions, sometimes you don't even need to pass out any money. People listen to it. I mean, the power of persuasion for somebody of that stature is so so unavoidable. It's something you can't ignore. But even when it goes with a gift of 10,000 yen, it's hard to deny. So they both got nailed for that. And as you might remember, we had by-elections about 3 months ago, and the LDP really got their teeth kicked in because in 2 of the 3 districts, the LDP was the reason for the by-election was because of bribery and graft. So the LDP is not looking very clean there, but even given that, the prognosis for the LDP winning is higher than it not winning. The complicating factor in Hiroshima is that although it was an LDP election for the upper house, the LDP chapter in Hiroshima did not agree with the recommendations of the LDP headquarters in Tokyo. That happens a lot. You might remember we talked about the difference between Tokyo central government and what happens in the municipalities in Hokkaido, the governors, the municipalities in applying, COVID vaccine, all of these things. So there's this tension that's just natural there, but it also happens at the party level. You would hope, you would think that the LDP is unified and tight, but it's not. And the election in Hiroshima is a signal of that, but it's the same thing as in Osaka too. Osaka is the second biggest city in Japan. It's hugely important economically, but also politically, with Isshin no Kai being the main party there. So there's plenty to look at there with the LDP use of money, and I'm going to close this part up with just a couple of toss-ins. Mizuho Bank, a couple of executives there resigned because of computer failure. The story is that there was a glitch in the software, and the machines ate up some of the passbooks. I don't know if that's the true story with what's going on with the hacking in the United States and how easy and how prevalent that seems to be. The quiet hacking that goes on, companies never talk about it. I think that there might be something more sinister to that, but that happened just last week, and I just want to point it out because there might be some people that want to talk about that. And then finally, how do you say it? So it's like the government. Whenever you give the government the ability to encroach on rights or to promote a policy, it never unleashes those. It never gives them up. It just goes from building on one encroachment going to another. And we've seen this quiet, careful march, even within the central government of trying to centralize power within the prime minister's office and within the chief cabinet secretaries, the secretariat of the prime minister. It's been going on for 25 years. It continues, and if you want to run a tight government, you want to have it centralized. The way the Japanese government is, this prime minister is not the central figure. He is a central figure, but the cabinet is comprised of supporters of the prime minister, but it's more of a team effort rather than a presidential effort. And the Japanese have long wanted to disengage from that and make the Japanese government a strong figure, a strong political figure, somebody who can be recognized at the international layer, and also be able to do and dictate things as not a prime minister would normally do through consensus, but being more bold about it. So the reason why I mention that is because the National Security Secretariat has formerly been run by the police commissioner, and they've made a change there now. It's now going to a politician. That was announced late last week. And the reason why that's important is because going from a professional to an administrator, you can see this drift going in for national security. It's like NSA, the CIA, that kind of thing. The Japanese are not well known to have that kind of national security apparatus, but they're building that. They're building that for a lot of reasons. And one of them is, the creation of the digital agency, which is such a huge deal. We haven't talked about it for 2 weeks because it's just still in the formative stage. It's supposed to be launched in October. It was scheduled for September. It looks more likely to be October, but a lot of work is going into that. The unfortunate comment of the minister for the digital agency was, "Don't worry, folks. It's okay. We're not going to hire any foreigners, so it's okay. Keep moving." Those kind of unhelpful comments just exacerbate some of the other things that are being said. For example, we're not going to have any foreign spectators, so don't worry about that. It'll just be us Japanese. These kinds of things are unhelpful and ineffective in getting that kind of message across. With that, I'd like to close that up and open it up. Gosh, I've gone long. I apologize. Let's take as many questions, comments, and input as we can, and then try and close this up before 9:30 or so, Maya?
Yes, if possible. If not, you have to endure a little bit longer, but well.
I only do what I'm told.
Okay, thank you for that. So thank you very much for this, review. And I was also wondering, because for me it was actually kind of, realization. I mean, it's so obvious, but still, that of course they closed the session of the diet on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, or was it Wednesday? However. But still, the cabinet, they continued to work on different bills and policies and guidelines. So it's more like what I actually found in one of the news outlets, is that Suga's government actually they approved a guideline for a policy guideline, which will focus on promoting green society and digitalization. So it came as a surprise to me, because we already knew, that they were going to they approved the bill of the digital agency, and that it was going to be open in September or October. But still, they need such guidelines. Why is it? I mean, you've got the bills. Why do you need the guideline for this then? Could you help me with this, please?
No, I'm finished talking.
Okay, sorry then. If somebody can help me, please do. Takeshi, good morning.
Good morning, Maya. Good morning, Timothy. Thank you.
Good morning, Takeshi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
I have two questions. Question number one is I've been always joking with my colleagues in America because they keep asking me, do we still have Summer Olympics on? And I said, yes, but most likely no audience, no spectators, and maybe no athletes. Then based on what you say, it's becoming like that. So you
That's
still
funny.
think, we have a chance that Suga-san will declare the cancellation. That's question number one. Then question number two is about former Justice Minister Mr. Kawai. Then, as we all know, he's getting the $1,500,000 funding from the LDP headquarters. And I think many of the audience here who are not familiar with Japanese politics wondering why a prosecutor is digging on where and how he got those funding from the LDP. Now, if you can share with your insight or take.
That's a great question. So I didn't touch on that because it's kind of a loaded question. So when you're arrested in Japan, everybody knows because they followed Carlos Ghosn, they put you in solitary confinement and they question you as long as they want, as often as they want, keep the lights on, and your rights are so limited. If you want to take a shower, it's open to negotiation. If you didn't answer the questions or if you weren't polite enough, you don't get to take a shower. So it's really it's the way they practice justice here. So they had both his wife and Katsuyuki in solitary confinement, and they won't release them. They won't soften the prosecution unless they get a confession, and they've been told everything. So they've raided the house, they've looked at their phone records, they basically know everything. And then they go to trial, and they maybe they go a little bit lenient on the judge. Maybe in the press they say, we want 5 years and we want him to be fined 2 million yen. So the court says, well, we'll give him 3 years and we'll fine him 1.3 million yen. So the prosecutors didn't get everything they want, but maybe they didn't fight that hard because they got all the goods. And the goods are, where did the money come from? Of course it came from the LDP. Everybody knows it came from the LDP. Even the LDP knows it came from the LDP. But they're not being called to question on that. I think it's curious. He was the activator, but the LDP, who was the functionary of providing the money, isn't a party to that criminal proceeding. It's curious. So I think the proof will be in giving it to the electorate when the elections come on. So you will see much more of this. Where did the money come from? Sakura no Omirukai, the Abe administration, the LDP, Mr. Nikai. And Mr. Nikai said, I wasn't in charge. That was somebody else. He's not pointing at Mr. Abe, but of course he's saying that. So I think the general consensus is it did come from from Mr. Abe, who wanted to pack the lower house and the upper house with LDP politicians. And you might remember there were a couple of politicians, one of them was with Komeito, but a couple of LDP politicians who were caught drinking in Ginza during the state of emergency, and you're not supposed to be out there, and they were chastised and then released from their duties as LDP members. They were still Diet members. And now the LDP is going back to them and saying, we'll let you back in. Because of this desire to have 2/3 in the upper house and 2/3 in the lower house. They have 2/3 in the upper house by just a hair, and they have 50% in the lower house. And the reason for that number being so important is, once again, the revision of the Constitution. You need 2/3 approval of the upper house, 2/3 of the approval of the lower house, and that's why the coalition with Komeito is so important. So the LDP is not doing everything that it wants. It needs to accommodate the wishes of Komeito too. But if they were wildly successful in the election and they were able to succeed 2/3 in the lower house as well in this next election, things would change pretty drastically, I think you would say. So I hope that responds to the question about that shady money from the LPP, Takeshi.
Yeah, so he's saying basically with this sentence to Mr. Kawai, this case will be closed. No further investigation. As usual.
Yeah, I think, as usual. So the prosecutor, the chief prosecutor, you might remember when Mr. Abe was prime minister, he didn't want to change prosecutors, even though his term of office came up. It is in the law that he must, as a bureaucrat, he must retire, he must move on. And Mr. Abe kept him in position because the number 2 fellow, the fellow who would be coming up, is somebody who's opposed to Mr. Abe and who would come at him with a vengeance. That transition has already occurred, and now that public prosecutor is the chief prosecutor. So, yeah, I don't think we've seen the end of it. I don't know why it has received so little coverage, but maybe it will, the opposition will definitely be hammering on it during the elections. Oh, and by the way, your first question was about the Olympics. Yes, the Olympics will go on, come hell or high water. Yes, it might be just the athletes. If there's a cluster, if a bunch more athletes or teams come in carrying variants, something happens in Osaka or in Tokyo, it could be that they just shut it down, but the Olympics will be held.
Thank you for that. Well, let's see. And Miss Koike said that, yes, the Olympics, well, she actually didn't mention about the opening and holding the Olympics, but she said that all the public spots, for public viewing spots will be cancelled during the Olympics. So let's see what happens. Yes. Good morning.
Thank you.
Hello, Fumi. Thank you, Takeshi.
Thank you. Fumi, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Maya-san. Good morning, Timothy-san.
What's your comment today?
My comment is 2 things. No, 1 comment and 1 question. So first of all, the comment. I think I felt like a change in direction of the wind since like 3 weeks ago. When the vaccine has been rolled out, and I can tell that Mr. Suga is on the surfboard on this wave of kind of speed of the vaccine is inoculated recently, like 100 million people a day, and he's like really, really cool. He looks really cool to me. And also last week there was a debate among political leaders, and I was kind of amazed, how Mr. Suga responded and how he talked against all those opposition parties leaders. I was so disappointed that Mr. Edano, who is a leader of Rikken Minshito, couldn't answer Mr. Suga's questions about controlling citizens of Japan and etc. So yeah, that's my comment. So I think there's if the vaccine rolls out is completely done, and also Olympics is held really successfully, Mr. Suga will be reached to the shore, and everybody on the shore will be kind of giving him applause, like go Mr. Suga. But anyway, that's my comment. But my question is about Miss Koike. So can you tell me the biggest achievement she's done while she's been Tokyo mayor?
Sure, easy. You ready? You got your pens up?
Yeah.
Okay. No disaster, no scandal.
Okay. That's pretty much it.
Oh, that's it. That's a sign of success, though. I mean, compared to the 2 former governors, they had to leave as a consequence of scandal. So I think the Tokyo citizens just give us something clean. Just keep things going. So, there were some challenges that she had with the movement of the Tokyo Tsukiji fish market. There was a lot of problems with that. She got through that pretty good. With COVID and the fight with the central government, she came off really well. She was on TV almost every day reporting on the vaccines and on the numbers. She looks good. She's got her hair done. She dresses well, and she seems to be really on top of things. And I think that's effective administration. It's not about scoring home runs. It's just about keeping the city moving smoothly and avoiding the kind of scandals that are a characteristic part of national government.
Okay. So in a way, Mr. Suga has been achieving that point. He hasn't had any scandals.
Okay, so Mr. Suga is a little bit different because he's in the national government, and any achievements that he's had has been diminished and denigrated because of the COVID rollout, because of the vaccine rollout, because of COVID, and because of the Olympics. And when you see him in press conferences, he visually looks tired. He looks meek. He doesn't project that kind of dominating leadership. Although the cabinet seems to be doing very well, and that seems to be pretty tight. He's got problems with the LVP part of it, but I think the calibration for effectiveness and success are different for Suga as compared to Koike. And by the way, were you here last week?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Timothy-san.
Yes.
Fumi, were you here last week? Okay.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I've been listening. I think I gave you like a comment or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I was.
Sorry. I missed seeing your rooster.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. That's all right.
Thank you.
And also, Koike-san
every week.
handled the Cairo University degree scandal well, right?
What was the scandal there?
Scandal, wasn't it?
Like there's a allegation that her degree was kind of falsified. She did not graduate from Cairo University, but
yeah, but it wasn't scandal. She actually graduated from that Cairo University.
Well, there's a lot of speculation on that, so there's even book. So it's not a big scandal, but there are little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's important, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Koike strikes me as a very skillful politician. So she has been able to go, yes, really untainted.
Yeah, but what I don't like.
Yes.
Sorry, what I don't like.
Sorry for me, I lost you.
Like behind her. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
Yeah. So what I don't like about Miss Koike is she's kind of hiding behind Mr. Suga about Olympics and COVID situation. Yes, she's kind of being spokesman, but kind of she's always waiting for Mr. Suga's approach. Then she decides something. So I think I want her to be kind of more front and more. I want her to show more leadership. Yeah.
Yes.
That's my opinion. Yeah, thank you.
I can see that, and I also think that your observation once again shows that she's really skilled in Japanese politics, because that's how things happen here, right?
You're right.
Yeah,
I agree.
yes. Sorry, I mean, this is my answer, and I cannot give you a better one, but that's obviously what quite a few other people think too. So thank you for that comment for me. And Mayuko, good morning.
Good morning, Mayuko.
Good morning, Maya, Timothy. Thank you so much for having me here. I just came up to say, Timothy, I like your new profile photo. And
thank you. So I asked Maya to help me cut it short today because in fact, just about every Sunday that we've had the show, I've been on the water. That's why I fall off of the radar every once in a while, because the bandwidth is not so great here. But yes, Maya said, why don't you change your photo so everybody knows that you're still square, but you're kind of out on the water.
And also, I just wanted to say that, Timothy, I wish your book was still available, because I really would have loved to read it.
Burn it. Yeah.
Anyway, so my question this morning is on geopolitics, and especially on China. And let me try to express. Hopefully, I can express myself clearly. But I guess I have two questions. The first question is, how likely do you think is it that China takes over Taiwan in our lifetime, let's say in the next 20, 30 years? And my second question is that, or comment and question is that, I think we all know that Beijing always plays the long game. And I guess my question is, what do you think is the real intention of Beijing? What is really at the bottom of how Beijing has been behaving in Hong Kong and other places in the world? Do you think that what or how Beijing's trying to achieve has changed since Mr. Xi Jinping became the president? I think that it is insecurity which is at the bottom of how they're acting, which I think is also not hard to imagine given the history of China being the big victim of Western and Japanese invasion and imperialism. But I also feel that when there is no democracy and when the existence and the survival of your political system itself becomes the purpose and not the means to create a better society for people, which I think is the biggest contradiction, then there's a lot of things that can happen that we find unnatural. So these are two questions for me. And I hope I expressed myself clearly this time.
No, you very much did. I think actually the answer is embedded in your question. Last week we had Stephen Nagy on. I don't know if he's in the audience now, but this is really Dr. Nagy's area of expertise. If you're in the audience, Stephen, please come up and give us some insight. And I think, within our lifetime, I think, just listen to what they say. They say that's what they're going to do. They're going to unite it, the rogue regime, because they're a part of China in any event, and nobody should stop us because it's just turning back the clocks of what what should have happened in the beginning. And there is a national desire to do that, and they're putting an awful lot of money and energy and effort into achieving that end. So your guess is as good as mine, but I think if they want to do it, I think the fact is that they can do it if that's what they want to do. It's going to cause so much damage and realignment of the global order, especially with regard to the shipping and economy in this region of the world, and probably the relationship between the United States and Japan. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So I think all we can do is keep our eye on it and hope for the better. Hope that deterrence is the better route that is evaluated by the Chinese national government. But we just have to wait and see. I don't have an answer for it. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Timothy.
Thank you. Thank you for always staying tuned.
Thank you. And we've got Nevin. Nevin, good morning.
Good morning, my son. Good morning, Timothy-san.
What's your
Good morning.
comment or question today?
Okay, my question is basically, I just want to understand the Japanese people's opinion on the current Biden administration, and if they feel like they want Trump back, or are they happy with Biden? Because I think Trump did a lot but with Biden, the whole world can get affected because of inflation and all that. I just wanted to ask my question. I'm not from Japan, but I love the Japanese politics, and I like Japanese language, and I think like the you know the alliance, or the kind of connection between Japan and America, that sets the tone towards like how things work in Asia. So I just want to ask this question.
Okay, so you posed the question to the Japanese, and it's like saying, Tokyo doesn't represent Japan. It certainly doesn't. It's different from the rest of Japan. So asking somebody like me to answer on behalf of the Japanese is the same sort of thing. I watch things differently, and I have my own biases. I can't answer for what the normal Japanese feel about the new Biden administration. I would guess that the court is still kind of out. It's still young. It's just 6 months old. It's moved at such a brisk pace, and the animosity between the Republicans and the Democrats is so out in the open. Nobody really likes to see that kind of controversy in this country. So I don't know. I would defer to my Japanese colleagues and those who are on the room to respond about what their evaluation is of the Biden administration.
Teo-san, what is your opinion? Like, if I'm asking you directly.
You mean his opinion about the Biden administration?
Yeah, like whether he thinks Trump was better or if Biden was better. I mean, you don't have to answer it. It's just my question. If you'd like to.
Timothy?
Yeah, I like the way you put.
Please go ahead.
Did you get that? No, I said I like the way you asked it the first time. What do the Japanese think, rather than Tim Langley? What do you think? I think that would just invite
Okay.
too much controversy. I think it's just too controversial.
Okay.
How the Japanese feel, generally speaking, yeah, I'm not in a good position to.
Okay.
Navin, if I can answer, I mean, my personal feeling.
Yeah, please.
So when there was the election of the president, of the United States, I was a bit worrying about Biden's son, because everybody talking like he's going to raise the company's tax crazily, from 5% to 30% or something. And I think he was actually proposing a higher tax rate. And I was worrying that maybe that will crash the sort of U.S. stock markets, and that leads to Japanese markets and etc. So I was worrying about it. And but after Biden's son won, and the S&P and all U.S. markets is grown, and recently of course it's been a bit dropped, but the economy has been doing well. And also, there isn't much hate compared to before. While Trump's era, there was a lot of hate in between people and in between countries. So I think I feel much safer and more peaceful, compared to Mr. Trump administration. That's how I feel.
But Smith-san, right now, sorry, thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. And the thing is, right now, I see the news, right? The inflation is going crazy. It's I don't know if it's because of the $6 trillion spending bill or whatever they, went on. There's a lot of spending happening there, and lumber has gone through the roof, and gas prices have gone through the roof. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. It's in America. I was like, okay. But then now, I wanted to build a house. And now it's the lumber prices, everything has gone up like crazy. And I'm wondering what the hell is happening. So I don't know what's going to happen to the dollar. And I just follow this guy called Michael J. Burry. he was the guy who like predicted, the housing crisis thing in 2008 or 2007. Not
Following
predicted.
it too. Yes, he's very astute.
Cassandra, yeah. So, but basically, it's not like he's like a savior, Jesus Christ or something. He just basically shorted everything and he made a lot of money. All right. So, but then if you go to his prediction, recently he made a prediction like saying like everything's a bubble. It's gonna like go back to like how it was like like in 1930s or anything.
It's gonna crash.
Like,
yeah,
the crash is gonna happen, and like I don't care. Like Trump probably he had a really like bad PR or something comparatively. Like people didn't want him to be himself. So his tweets like kind of people got triggered or anything. But Biden is just like this very somber guy, like hey man, all that stuff, and he's not like like that aggressive. Like yeah, probably that's a welcome thing, I guess, from the world of politics. But then you actually look into it, I guess his policies are just gonna fuck the whole world up. Sorry for the profanity. I just feel like if Michael Burry is saying this is gonna get messed up, I'm just scared, man. Like if whatever happens in America is gonna like mess up the whole world, not Japan, whatever. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable to face the inflation, high inflation, because there's a lot of financial stimulation to not into all U.S. market or Japan and all of the world basically. So there's sort of surplus of money in the market. So I think that we need to do like a landing slowly, like safely land it to somewhere safe, rather than crash it. So we'll see what U.S. government is going to do in terms of the financial policy. Maybe next few months.
Yes, but thing is the regulatory, the people in the regulatory power are the ones in charge of spending. And I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm fucking scared.
Okay, so Nevin, thank you very much for that. But since
Thank you,
my son. I'm gonna mute myself. Sorry. Yeah,
that's okay. Yes, thank you very much for that. And well, this is a room about Japan anyway, so thank you very much for being so considerate as well. And we've got Aya. Good morning.
Good morning, Maya.
Good morning.
Timothy. Thank you for having me again.
You're very welcome. What's your comment today?
Okay, it's not a question actually. I have a comment for Kumi-san. I hope you're not gonna take it personally, but when you said Governor Koike of Tokyo was hiding Mr. Suga, I was like, I disagree with you because as I recall, the last year when Mr. Abe was prime minister back then, and she was the very first one to say it out loud that if we don't control the virus, Tokyo may have to lock down. And then Mr. Abe, he was kind of laughing at her and stating that we're not gonna lock down ourselves just like London or any other cities in abroad because we don't have to. And then Koike, Miss Koike, Governor Koike was she was so frustrated with them and the government, and she wanted to shut down everything, including hairdresser and nail salons and stuff like that. But the government, the prime minister Abe back then said that we're not going to do that. So, when you said Koike was hiding Mr. Suga, I completely disagree with you. And I live in Tokyo, and as far as I'm concerned, I think she's doing the best she can. And, nobody wants to be a governor of Tokyo, right, especially right now. But I think she's doing the best she can. So, yeah, I'm done speaking. I'm sorry, Kumi-san. I'm not attacking you or anything, but I just have to comment on that.
That's okay. I mean, I'm always welcome people's opinions, and I appreciate how you feel as a Tokyo person. Really, I'm being maybe controlled by medias and maybe wider show during the lunchtime.
Yeah.
So, but I said my opinion, you said your opinion. Then
Yeah.
maybe. But I'm not like totally against Miss Koike at all. I'm just getting a little bit sort of improvement points or a little bit sort of something that being
Right.
found.
Right.
So yeah, I agree. I mean, Miss Koike-san doesn't have any scandal.
Let's move on.
Yeah, doing it well. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Don't take it personally.
No,
yeah.
don't worry. No, don't worry.
Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for being so tolerant, both of you. And we've got Ren. Good morning, Ren.
Good morning or good evening from Philadelphia.
Good evening to you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the space. I felt I needed to ask Tim this question, if I may, because Tim, I have heard many things that I didn't hear or I haven't heard from typical Japanese media, and then you may know something else, something
Shocking.
other.
Shocking.
Yeah, extremely shocking, right? So the point is, I was watching the news. They said that the Japanese House, they were almost unanimously trying to send a message to people of the Republic of China, PRC's government, to condemn or criticize the way they have been doing things that we don't have to repeat here. But Komeito, which is a Buddhist party, they all agreed that we should send this message because they are the Buddhist people. They love peace. They don't like the way PRC is doing. But their head of the party, Mr. Yamaguchi, was the one single-handedly voted it down. So at the end, they couldn't send that unified message as a country of Japan. And that was what the media has been saying, but they never explained why Mr. Yamaguchi is sticking out his neck for PRC. And do you know anything about why he is behaving like that? Because the media couldn't even explain.
That's a great question. Ren, are you signing on late today? Were you on?
I'm sorry?
From the beginning?
Oh, I was not. I jumped in from the middle. Did you already discuss this? I am sorry if you did.
Yes, we did. You get 10 demerit points. So you have to go to the back of the line. But just to recap, so Komeito, of all the political parties, is the one that is closest to the Chinese government. It has a long relationship ever since the beginning, the establishment of the party. And in fact, it is a good thing. You always want to have a channel. You always want to have some affinity, even with your enemies. You need to have that back channel. And the Komeito is playing that role. They are in a coalition government with the LDP, as we know. So right. There is this. Yeah, I think it's healthy. The things that the Suga administration wanted to do, they wanted to kind of tweak the nose of the Chinese because they just got back from G7, right? So G7 and his meeting with Biden, we've got to be united on this. We have to tweak their nose, we have to go with the united front. And Japan has its own politics. It doesn't need to do everything that the United States wants it to do. And I think there's always that tension there. And I think the Komeito is that kind of breaking power on the LDP to prevent them from doing all of those things that they really would like to do. Maybe they don't want to do, but it's an easy scapegoat to say, well, given Japanese domestic politics, we can't tweak the Chinese as much as we want to, Mr. Suga, Mr. Biden, but we're doing our very best. I hope that responds.
Got it. But Tim, there's a slight nuance difference. The report, the media was saying the entire Komeito was for that vote, but only Mr. Yamaguchi, single person, was against it. Was that your understanding as well? Because based on what you just said, it seems like Komeito as a whole was playing that Yamaguchi's role, right? But I don't know if the media was reporting this accurately, but I did hear that the entire Komeito was actually for this vote. Only Yamaguchi-san was not. So I was curious if you know something special about this person.
No, I don't know. That happened so recently that I haven't really had an opportunity, and it hasn't been reported too much in the weekly rags about the background and the back office.
No, that's fair. Thank you. And Maya, can I ask just one more question, or are we running out of time?
Sure. No, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to. It's a question and also a statement. I have heard many times that the PRC has been using this expression that we want to reunite with Taiwan, because somebody else mentioned about Taiwan, so I thought I had to say this. Not a single second has PRC ever governed Taiwan. So I think reunification is inaccurate and not a very honest expression. That's the first statement. And then the One China policy. The One China policy really has two components, right? The first component is we, meaning US citizens like myself, America, and Japan, we both agree that there's only one China government, the official China government, and that is PRC. The other component is not an agreement. It's just an acknowledgement or understanding that PRC wished Taiwan is a part of China. That is not an agreement. That's just an acknowledgement. So when China or PRC mentioned that one China means both, that is also a false statement. So I wish the media would make those 2 points or 2 components clearly separated. With that being said, I think it's conceivable that both US and Japan are basically sending a message to PRC right now that we have respected, acknowledged, and understood your desire to have Taiwan as part of PRC. But if your behavior continues to get worse and worse, we have right to reverse that position. We are able to say, we don't understand, we don't acknowledge, because that's not agreement, right? Agreement and acknowledgement is a huge difference in diplomatic world. So my question to you is, do you think it's too far-fetched to think that the US and Japan are thinking of downgrading that acknowledgement, understanding, to we do not understand or we don't agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, do you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. So the indicia of why I would say that is the reference to Taiwan as a country. You've heard it a couple of times over the last 3 weeks. A couple of times it was a slip of the tongue and it was retracted, but more recently it has been purposely stated as a kind of tweak at the nose. So yes, I think the threat is if you continue like this, then our position is let the Taiwanese decide. Let them decide if they're going to be part of you or not, and let them establish. They've already established their own country. We recognize them. We're going to establish an embassy there. We're going to accept their diplomatic missions, that sort of thing. And that's not the case, right?
Right.
So I think it's ripe for a change, and I think you're right. It's just kind of wait and see. Don't push the boundaries too far, and you can maintain status quo. But, if you go much further than this, it's kind of, throwing down the gauntlet.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that 40 years ago, these diplomats foresaw that they needed to have a room for improvement, in other words, we agree that PRC is an official government, but Taiwan issue is just understanding, not agreement. That little room made a huge difference 40 years later. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many examples of that. Article 9 of the Constitution, just these small tweaks and what a difference it makes. Oh my gosh, look at that. It's 9:30.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for your comment. I'm done speaking, Maya. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ren. Yes.
Ren, you have to show up on time next week. You're going to be put in detention or something.
Yeah, I will try to. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Maya, may I just say one more thing?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, just to add to what I said earlier, and just wanted to make myself clearer. I feel that whether there is democracy or not, there are always people or groups that act on insecurities, and I think it's very common. I mean, we do it. I do it. But when it is systematic, like CCP, I feel the risk and the impact on the world is bigger, much bigger. So the more important question to ask is, how do we work with such a political system? And to me, the only way is to get to know each other, try to understand each other, and have a genuine dialogue. So I think as Japanese, I feel all of us should think about what is Japan's role in all this, and what can Japan do more to create not to judge or not to say our political system is better, yours is wrong. I mean, the fact is there are different political systems, and that we have to work with what we got. So that's what I wanted to share at the end.
Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, Japan is not going to be the deciding factor here.
Unfortunately.
Yes, okay, but I still feel it's important for all of us to think and to to have a dialogue at least, and to get to know people. I mean, I have studied in China. I speak Chinese. I have a lot of Chinese friends. So when I listen to the news in the media, I have different perspectives because I have studied with them. I have lived with them. So that influences your thoughts.
Sure, but you've heard over and over thousands of times, I like the Iranian people, but I just don't like the government. I like Americans,
Right.
but I don't like their government. The Venezuelans are great people, but I really don't like their government. This
Right.
sort of thing. So you get these psychopaths and these sociopaths in positions of power. They don't care. They don't care about
Timothy, you're right. But
that sort of thing.
Yeah, but it's also the people who can change, who can make a change in their own political system. So I don't want to give up, to be honest. So
Don't
I'm going
give
to
up.
keep on trying.
I'm with you,
Absolutely.
Mayuko-san.
Thank you, Aya.
Yeah.
Me
Great.
too.
Thank you, Fumi.
Yes, because if we lose that faith that people can change their governments, then nothing's going to happen anyway. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I respond to Tim's comment about Japan cannot play that
Sure.
role? Yeah, I echo with you. But I want to also share my own thought about why that is the case. Once we understand why, maybe there's a way we can make Mayuko-san, よろしかったでしょうか? Mayuko-san's dream come true. Yeah, because when I am in Japan, my friends, some of my best friends would say, "Oh, we are just a colony of United States. We only can listen to. I mean, they force us to do this and do that." Okinawa, of course, Okinawa is a tricky issue. I told them that is not the case. The late John McCain, Senator John McCain, said it very clearly. We really want Japan to be our partner, but because Japan does not raise their hand to say, "Okay, let us take care of, let's say, Philippines issue. We are the real partner of the United States, and we are closer to Asia." So in Japanese, we call it volunteer. You will raise your hand and say, "Okay, United States, I will take care of that part of Asia, and you take care of this part." Japan never says that. So United States have to say, "Hey, Japan, can you do this?" And then if you feel like you have been forced by a superior country to tell you to do this and that, and because of that you feel like you are a colony of the United States, that is just the wrong way to think. So as long as Japan have that mentality that they lost World War II and they are the colony of America, that mentality remains there. I don't think Japan can ever become an Asian leader, and I hope that mentality can change someday. And how do we change the mentality of Japanese people? I do not know, but I feel that's the root cause of the problem. Maybe there are some other problems. Maybe Kim, you can share, but that's my view.
Thank you very much. The only comment that I would have to what you just said is, what do they call it? Bank book diplomacy. That's really the most viable tool that the Japanese have, since it's a very rich country. It can use money to achieve its aims, but it's on it just doesn't have the tools and the diplomatic forces at its disposal as, for example, the United States. But, yeah, I agree.
I have a question. I have a question with regards to what Ren-san said. Can I go on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. See, I'm not like well versed with geopolitics involving Japan and America. I just want to say, I think Japan is like an amazing country with an epic economy and such. So I was wondering, do they have an military, a strengthening happening in Japan, or they don't want to pursue that, with regards to military and such. So that's a question I had. And if they were to, start building the military, would there be Gundams involved?
Yeah, I think you just opened a can of worms.
Indeed, yes. So
yeah, okay, I didn't know. I'm sorry.
No, that's a fair question. Yeah, that's a fair question, though. Very fair question.
Okay, so we talked about this. Go ahead, Ren.
Oh no, I just want to add one more thing. That is when my Japanese friends told me that Japan is a colony of the United States, the way I push it back is to tell them that, if you are really a colony, and if you raise your hand and ask your master that you want to do this and do that, and the master will tell you no or yes. But United States is not like that. United States actually would like to hear what you want to do, instead of United States keep on telling you what to do. So from that point alone, you can see Japan is not a colony, and United States really respect Japan as a partner. And I hope some people like myself, just talking to people at the grassroots level, may be able to change our friends in Japan's mentality a little bit towards more independent. My question, I don't know if I'm on the right track or not, but I hope your view can be realized someday.
Thank you so much, Ren-san. I really appreciate it. I agree with you. I feel that right now in this world, I feel whoever is the loudest, whoever is the most powerful in terms of military, in terms of mind force, they are being heard. But I think that's exactly why there is a lot of injustice we see in the world. And I think this is exactly what we need to change. So I agree with you, Ren-san, that to do that, we all have to feel empowered, that our voice makes a difference.
Thank you.
I think let's all hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah, true.
What is the worst is the question.
I don't know. I just said that. Let's
build Gundams, please.
Okay, let's all hope for the best. How about that?
Thank you. Great, Maya-san, thank you.
Ren-san, if I can share my story, while I was in primary school. My teacher at primary school, it was 4 years ago, she told us that atomic bomb in Hiroshima was the right thing to do. In her mind, it was justified. Because
oh my gosh! To stop the war quickly, faster, easier way without much fights in this land. So it was the easiest way to do it, and that's the sort of the mentality our generation been having. I'm not sure, but my classmates have been had this kind of mentality. So I think we gotta get out from that,
that kind of mentality. Also, we need to change the education systems and also train teachers, etc. Thank you.
Yes, I agree on that with you. And I mean, nothing can justify, the obliteration of 2 entire cities just in the blink of an eye. So I'm sorry for your having that experience, and being told such a thing. So hopefully, of course, you have heard, I'm sure, that there is a push for a change in the education here in the educational system. Of course, it's going to take time, like everything does. But yes, as Aya said, we need to hope for the best. And I agree with Mayuko that without our action, on everything, which we feel about, nothing will change. So yeah, let's see what we can do. And I also want to say that Timothy is probably, just running in circles now and, trying to get the boat ready for the sail today. So Timothy, I'm sorry for keeping you here, for such a long time. And I hope that you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. I thank you everybody who joined it with comments and questions. We're going to be here again next week at 8 o'clock. In the meantime, today's session has been recorded. It will be uploaded on the Japan Expert Insights site. So if you need to go over some of the parts which you have missed or want to hear again, you can do that there later next week. Thank you very much again for coming.
Can I say one final thing?
Yes, okay. Just 10 seconds, please.
Okay, 10 seconds. There's an anime called Gate in Japan. It's about the Nihon Jietai, Japanese JSDF, and it's about how the JSDF encounters like alien species and go into another world and how they like treat people and everything. So I think if the Japanese army or something comes up, it'll be really cool to see. That's all I had to say. I also just said this because it's going to be recorded and puts it somewhere important. So I hope this gets through. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. Timothy, thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for joining in. Next week is going to be even more exciting with the initiation of the Tokyo Metropolitan elections. There'll be plenty to talk about, so please stay tuned.
Yes, please do. Well, I'm going to close the room in about 15 seconds. So if you would like to follow some of the people in the audience or some of the speakers, please give them a follow now. And if not, if you have done this already, we're going to, hopefully see you again next week. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Timothy.
See you next week.
See you next week, everyone. Bye.